All right. Thank you all for gathering. In fact, I think we have more people now, so that's great. So this is the special open meeting of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. It's 1:30. So this is a meeting to discuss the summer readiness plans for this year by the utilities. So the preparations for the generation that will need to meet demand, especially during tight system conditions. So we'll go ahead and get started with a roll call.
Commissioner Nybert? Here. Commissioner Aguilera?
Still here.
Commissioner O'Connell? Here. All commissioners are here. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum if you need it.
Okay. So we'll get through the formalities here. So we have a agenda before us, commissioners. Do you have any changes to the agendas?
I do not.
Agenda. Okay, great. So we'll just approve the agenda then by voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, and none opposed. So we added a public comment session to the beginning of our agenda. And I do want to note, though, as we go through the questions, I'll also look for opportunities to ask our staff to see if they have any questions that they would like to ask. But let's go ahead and get started with public comment. Do we have any public comment on the resource adequacy summer readiness? We don't have any in person. Do we have any online? Okay. None online either. So we'll go ahead and get started with some introductory remarks. And I have some, but my computer was restarting. So commissioners, if you have any, you can take this opportunity.
No, I think this coupled with the gas supply plan in the fall are both very informative, worth doing. Thank you for being here. And then smart aleck joke is, didn't we already have summer? I mean, the climate data for March was impressive. So we'll see how best laid plans versus what we're going to see this summer are roll out.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I thank you all for gathering today. And so we've had similar presentations for the last 3 years. In 2023, things seemed like they were going to be really, really tight over the summer. And, we've been able to make it through. It seems that things have gotten somewhat better over that time period, especially in the Western interconnection. Obviously there are upcoming retirements and of plants, and so things are changing, and so we need to prepare and adapt. So I found these sessions useful the last few years to not just for the commission to understand where we're at, but for the public to understand where we're at for the summer, and for the utilities. I'm sure you all communicate, but I hope that this is also helpful for you to see how the other utilities are doing in preparations for the summer. So it's a difficult time for resource adequacy, and some regions have it harder than others. The Northwest has it a lot more difficult. Parts in the Northeast of the country more difficult as well. And but I feel like we're probably in a good position, but I guess I'll hear more about that today. And so again, thank you for preparing these presentations. Won't take up too much more time before we can get started, but commissioners, I did want to say that in order to make this a little bit more interactive, maybe we can ask questions as they come up. And that might help the conversation go a little smoother, rather than waiting and kind of changing topics. So with that, I'll turn it over to the New Mexico Rural Electric Cooperative Association and Tri-State and Western Farmers.
Mr. Chair, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure we got on the record that this is all occurring within a docket. It's docket 24-00123 UT, just for, people who are watching and whatever. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I'll turn it over maybe to Vince Martinez. Is that right? All right.
Yes, sir.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As you know, 15 of New Mexico's rural electric cooperatives receive their electricity from two generation and transmission cooperatives, Western Farmers Electric Cooperative and Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association. From cars to data centers, energy demand is at an all-time high, and the amount of surplus capacity in the market is getting smaller every day. It is vital for the utilities to maintain sufficient capacity to serve their loads without relying on the increasingly tight and volatile market to ensure electricity reliability and resilience. G&Ts own their own generation and transmission assets and are less dependent on the market. To guard against volatility and ensure reliability, the G&Ts employ an industry-leading reliability matrix to its resource planning and owns sufficient capacity to maintain a robust reserve margin. With that, I would like to introduce, with us today from Western Farmers is Gary Roulette, the CEO, and Dave Sontag. And going first will be Dan Walters from Tri-State. So with that, Mr. Walters.
Thank you for the invitation. Next slide, please. This first slide is just an introduction to Tri-State. Tri-State is regulated by FERC, and we are regulated by the Colorado PUC for resource planning in Colorado, and we were recently regulated by Wyoming PSC for wildfire mitigation. We have 39 cooperative members across 4 states. Those members serve approximately 1 million consumers and cover service territory of approximately 200,000 square miles. Our system peak, where a summer peaker is in July, and it's approximately 2,500 megawatts. We have over 5,900 miles of transmission system. We're so spread out. Not only are we a customer of Tri-State Transmission, but we're a customer of 8 other transmission providers. We operate in 5 different balancing authorities, and we're in both the Western and Eastern Interconnect. This April 1st, our Western Air Power Administration, WACM BA, transitioned with another BA into an expansion of SPP into the Western Interconnect. And in addition to that, we're working on transitioning into the SPP Markets Plus day-ahead market in our PSCO, in our service territory in the PSCO BA, and working on transitioning to EDAM that's run by the CAISO in our territory that's within the PNMBA. Here's sort of some maps of the evolution of both the CAISO and SPP markets in the West. A lot of this is kind of moving sand under our feet. Most of the WEAM members, I believe, are transitioning to EDAM, but there's quite a few in the Southwest, particularly in Arizona and the Northwest, that plan to join the SPP Markets Plus day-ahead market. Both, I believe, PNM joining or transition to EDAM is approximately October of 27, which is also when approximately Markets Plus is supposed to go live. The map on the right, I would caution, is a little outdated already, especially if you look at what is called the Western Resource Adequacy Program, the WRAP. that has gone through quite a bit of change in the last 6 months, as most of the members of planning to go to EDAM have withdrawn from RAP and are looking to start some sort of an equivalent resource adequacy program. If there's no questions, next slide. Here's the current projected summer electricity and natural gas prices. These are quite moderate compared to years past. We're seeing peak prices for electricity in the Palo Verde market on a monthly basis around $60 in August for on peak and around $45 off peak. And natural gas prices at Henry Hub are approximately $3 at the top of summer and about $2.50 at the Southern Cal index. Next slide. This is a review of our two-phase reliability-based resource planning process. We go through the process every 4 years with the Colorado PUC. We have a level 1 reliability metric, which is your standard planning reserve margin. Currently, we're planning for a 22% planning reserve margin through the end of 27 and 30.5% going forward. We are in the midst of a new study where we're hoping some of these between the regional RTO footprint in some of these day-ahead markets and the expansion of RAP and whatever the CAISO market comes up with, maybe there's some synergies there to drive those numbers down. TriSite also studies a level 2 reliability metrics. And what our goal is there is we take our current system and stress the system with actual events that we've seen in the past for extreme heat and extreme cold, and how our units are actually performing during those extreme heat and extreme cold days, with the goal that on those days we still maintain a 99% reliability basis. Next slide.
Dan, I do have a question on that slide. The planning reserve margin, is that a requirement by the Colorado PUC?
It's approved by the PUC. So our planning reserve margin will be and is different, I believe, than Excel's or Black Hills, Colorado, which are both also regulated by the Colorado PUC. So it's based off a study of our system and our assets, but it's approved by the PUC.
And how often do you file for approval?
I believe it's every 4 years. But again, with the rapidity of changing now, we might be doing it more often. Just the industry is changing so fast.
Okay, thank you.
Here's a bit of a summary of resources and some loads. All these resources, by the way, are ELCC values, the effective load carrying capability, not the nameplate. You can see Tri-State. Tri-State is one of the largest federal hydro purchasers in the United States. I believe we're the largest Western Area Power Administration customer in the United States. We have additional contract purchases, primarily from Basin Electric, based out of Bismarck, North Dakota. We have a bunch of wind and solar utility resources. Again, the 226 megawatts that you see here for 2026, that's the ELCC value. The nameplate value of those solar and wind resources is over 1,000. We've just begun our demand response programs. We still have 1,287 megawatts of coal generation, 765 of gas and oil. We don't have any batteries coming online until projected for 2028. And then you can see towards the bottom what our planning and operating reserves are versus our total obligation. And so Tri-State is actually slightly above where we need to be with planning reserve margin for 2026. guess while you're at it, if you're looking, you can see in 2028, that extra resource jumps up to 500 megawatts. That's primarily the result of, we've got a number of PPAs where we're selling to other utilities, and most of those are rolling out in the 2027 timeframe. And we will be following, we've been kind of hesitant to re-up. There's plenty of people that are interested in those resources, but with all the data centers and large loads that could pop up in our member service territory, we're kind of trying to hold back as long as we can, because we'd rather have that product available for our members if they need it.
Okay, and just to clarify, where we're seeing excess resources, that's above the planning reserve margin.
Yes,
Over and
those
above.
excess resources at the very bottom is resource above our targeted planning reserve margin. All right, next page. We're there. This gives a little breakout of our mix, both on capacity and by energy. Looking here, these capacities on the left, just to clarify, are not the same capacities you saw on the previous page. These capacities are nameplate, not ELCC, if that makes sense. And so nameplate wise, we're about 40% renewables, 29% coal, 15% natural gas, and 12% contract. The contract is the WAPA Hydro and the Basin Electric. And you can see for 2026 on an energy basis, will be approximately 42.4% of our system is renewable. That includes the approximately 500 megawatts of sales to others we're making. If we were to just point the renewable energy at our member system, we'll be over 50% renewable for 2026.
So I have a question on this one as well. So when you're looking, for example, at the forecasted tri-state system capacity for renewables, it's 40%. And then on the energy pie chart, it's 42.4%. Is that increase because of anticipated dispatches in the resources, or what causes that difference?
Well, I mean, they could all be different depending on how they're being dispatched, correct? So like the natural gas, you'll see there's a lot more capacity there than energy because we don't run the gas units so much. With tri-state renewables, we have a very high renewable capacity factor, if you will. It's primarily due to the nature of how our WAPA contracts work. So they're shaped kind of to our load, and a lot of those, particularly with the Colorado River system, are almost a base load product.
Okay, and yeah, I guess I was wondering whether it's like market dispatches that are kind of driving those dispatches. It sounds like maybe with this contract.
With the WAPA Hydro, it's kind of a take or pay. It isn't market dispatch, but all of our renewables are dispatched to the market. And generally, they'll be the last things curtailed, whether it's the CAISO WEAM market or SPP, because if it's solar with an ITC, there's zero incremental cost. And if it's a wind farm with a production tax credit, those wind resources generally won't get curtailed into a market until you get whatever, negative 30 or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Here's a kind of a graphical look of a stack of our resources and then also our loads, including our planning reserve margin. And as you can see, this August, we're very, very tight, getting down to that last 100 that we pointed at in a previous sheet. You can see that we're a summer peaker, and so that our margin gets quite a bit bigger through the shoulder months in the winter. And then next summer, again, we get pretty tight. But by summer of 27, we've got some additional wind and solar, which don't add a lot of capacity, but they still do have a ELCC value. And that's most of the change you're seeing. The other thing you can note is that for 2027, there's a little less member load due to some member exits. And here's just some other kind of tri-state specific ones that I thought I'd throw in there. And these aren't necessarily just for summer preparedness, but we have a hazard share agreement with Tucson Electric between our Springerville 3 and their Springerville 2 units. And so if they lose Springerville 2, we'll give them 100 megawatts for up to a week, and vice versa if we lose Springerville 3. So it's just a little bit of a hazard share with where none of us get banged quite as bad when we lose some of those large coal shafts. In addition, all of our pyramid units in southern New Mexico are dual fueled with fuel oil. That's kind of very necessary for tri-state because there's no firm gas transport available for those units down there. So if either there's a transport problem for natural gas or some huge price spike or just plain unavailability, we can switch fuel to diesel. And those aren't just actually the New Mexico resources. All of Tri-State's CT fleet is dual fueled. In addition, we've done some gas hedging up in Colorado for July and August just to help manage costs and to absorb the impact if there were any large price spikes. And that's all I brought. Thank you. I hope I hit the mark. I don't think Tri-State's given a report here before, so.
Commissioners, do you have any questions on this?
I know, I mean, I was listening and learned more by listening, so keep my mouth shut, right? But I appreciate you coming in and giving us that overview.
Okay, thank you.
I believe Western Farmers is next, Mr. Chairman. They are on Zoom.
Okay, can you guys hear us? Just doing a sound check.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Well-
We'll start. I'm Gary Willett, the CEO of Western Farmers, and I've got with me today Dave Sontag, our Vice President of Special Studies. And Dave's going to do the first part of this presentation, but I'll just give you a preview that Western Farmers is not going to look very much like Tri-State because we operate fully in the SPP market, and we're going to look more like Southwestern Public Service then we're going to look like somebody else because just bear in mind, we're going to be a different kind of power supplier than the other power supplier in New Mexico. So I'll turn this over to Dave and let him start the presentation. It's not very long, but I think it has everything you're looking for in it.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. Just want to give you a quick overview of who Western Farmers is. We're a G&T. We serve 21 members in Altus Air Force Base. Kind of see our service area there. We serve quite a bit of the state of Oklahoma, and we serve the 4 co-ops there, distribution co-ops in New Mexico, Farmers, Roosevelt County, Central Valley, and Lee County Electric Co-ops. Those 4 members are about 23% of Western Farmers' total sales, and about 15% of those sales are in the state of New Mexico. There's a portion of load in Lee County and Farmers that Lee County and Farmers has in Texas. When you look at that, the New Mexico load is about 20% of Western Farmers' peak demand. So when we look at planning, they make up about 20% of our demand in the summer. Western Farmers, we're a member of SPP. We do our planning based on a system-wide basis. So we look for the most affordable, reliable service we can provide. And so our resources are located all over the state of Oklahoma, and we have resources in New Mexico as well to try to get the most affordable, reliable power service to our members. Go to the next slide. So this is a look back at 2025 and how we kind of shaped up for that. I think going into the season, we had down on that table to the left, I think we had looked at our load forecasted peak demand being around 2,270 megawatts. I think our planning reserve margin for 2025 was 15%. And we had enough capacity to meet our demand or had planned on it with just a slight excess capacity there of around 5 megawatts. Our resources in 2025 were made up of roughly 46% natural gas, around 17% coal. Conventional, we had power purchase agreements, conventional base 19%, wind from an accredited capacity made up around 6%, hydro allocation around 10%. We did have a little bit of solar on our system time of around 2%, and just a small little distributed generation unit that we use as a resource in capacity accreditation. So our forecast was 2,270 megawatts. We came in well below that at 2,127. This is as a system. For our New Mexico members, we had in that 2,270 megawatts, we forecasted their peak load would be 466 megawatts, and the actuals came in around 415 megawatts. The peak load was lower in the summer. There was more precipitation in the system. I think overall it wasn't an extremely hot year, but it was an actual year where it was a little bit warmer than average. But I think the precipitation had a good bit to do with that. Part of our load is, some irrigation, and we saw that was a little bit less over this past summer. And, we don't look at that as, hey, we were, this weather, we're going to drive that and change our forecast moving forward because we had a little bit milder year or wetter year. So we take that into account, but that really doesn't drive what we do moving forward. You go to the next slide. Some changes that came about at SPP here that have been implemented for the 2026 season. SPP implemented a performance-based accreditation program into the tariff, which accredits conventional resources based on their performance. This is a 7-year rolling average using class averages for years prior to 2022. All other years will be based on the actual performance of our units. And when I talk about conventional resources, these are resources like our coal plant, gas units, those kind of resources. The effective load carrying capability, ELCC, was implemented in 2026. This is what SPP uses to accredit your wind, solar, and storage resources. So SPP has a base planning reserve margin requirement that the SPP approves as well as the regional state committee. And that base PRM for 2026 target is 16%. But the actual, what you're actually being held to meeting, the requirement is based off of the accredited capacity planning reserve margin, or ACAP PRM, which for 2026 was 7%. The numbers essentially provide the same amount of reliability, but having that performance-based accreditation in the calculation really benefits entities that have well-performing equipment, and it kind of hurts the ones that brought resources that didn't perform well. So it's there to provide an incentive for performing well and doing good maintenance on your equipment. You can go to the next slide.
Sorry, I just had a quick question. I think I understand what you just said, but what you're telling us is the Western farmers ACAP PRM is 7%?
No, I'm saying that SVP's requirement across the fleet is that you have to meet a 7% planning reserve margin requirement with
Yeah,
the
so-
ACAP, with the accredited capacity or your resources after performance-based accreditation and ELCC is taken into account.
Okay.
And for reliability, it's equivalent to 16% based on installed capacity of your generators. Okay, on 2026, so looking at Western Farmers fleet and how we're shaping up for 2026, we have around 1,400 megawatts of installed capacity of our owned resources, coal and natural gas units. The column to the right of that, talking about summer accredited capacity, that's after performance-based accreditation and ELCC is accounted for. So of the 1,400 megawatts of installed capacity, we get credit for just over 1,200 megawatts. In the section below, we have power purchase agreements, several kinds. We have a combined cycle power plant that we get capacity from in energy, 280 megawatts. We have small distributed generation, fleet power purchases where we get capacity plus reserves, hydroelectric power purchase. Again, that carries reserves. We have capacity only purchases and wind, solar, and battery. All of our wind, solar, and battery purchases are all through power purchase agreements, except for some small behind the meter solar that we have accounted for in here. But everything you see here is going to be a power purchase agreement. So we have a total accreditation of our resources of 2,676 megawatts. And breaking that down, where they're located, and we have our wind resources in Oklahoma and New Mexico. We have roughly almost 800 megawatts of wind in Oklahoma and close to 200 megawatts of wind in New Mexico. And we have solar in Oklahoma. We just added a new solar facility in Oklahoma. That's a 250 megawatt solar facility called Skeleton Creek, and it's coupled with a 252 megawatt storage facility co-located at the same interconnection. So again, the requirement for the base PR or for the base PRM is 16%. The ACAP requirement 7%. So our peak load that we're forecasting for 2026 is 2,211 megawatts for all of Western Farmers and 457 megawatts for New Mexico. Our resource adequacy requirements 2,367 megawatts. We're forecasting that we're going to have an excess of around 309 megawatts. So we're feeling like we're going into 2026 season much better than we were going into 2025 as we've added a few resources. We also added a wind farm as well, a 91 megawatt wind farm. So we're in much better shape going into 2026 than we were in 2025. Go to the next slide.
Actually, can we stay on that Well, no, we can go to the next slide, actually. It doesn't matter for purposes of my question. So thank you for that overview for this summer. How are things looking going forward? So, summer 27, 28, 29, just generally.
So really for the summer, that's looking good moving forward. I think we have no issues coming up in the summer at all. Where Western Farmers has concerns and what's driving our issues or our concerns are winter requirement. I didn't put any of that on here this time because I think we're just really addressing summer. But where Western Farmers is, our summer and winter peaks are very similar. And SBP moved from really having no winter reserve margin requirement. It was just an obligation to having a requirement and making that requirement 36%. Has a significant impact on Western Farmers and our members. And so we're going through a capacity build stage right now. We're installing, and Skeleton Creek has helped us with the solar and storage because storage gets some accreditation in the winter. But we are building some natural gas units. We have several phases of that going on. So we have quite a bit of capital expansion going on here at Western, but we do have plans to get the the additional capacity to meet those reserve requirements that SBP has, but they're going to take a little bit. Hopefully by 2029, we'll be able to meet those requirements, and in the meantime, up until there, we make purchases out of bilateral purchases for planning reserve margin. We get capacity, what they call deliverable capacity that we can purchase from other entities that may be long in the summer, where there are quite a few entities in SPP that are summer peaking and don't have as much of an issue in the winter. And so we can purchase their excess capacity in the summer to carry us until ours is built for the winter.
Okay, thank you. And you anticipated my next question about the winter. We're intimately familiar with SPP's winter planning reserve margin. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay, we'll move along a little bit, and I'll kind of go down the left side of this. By being in the SPP market, we operate quite a lot differently than when we operated before the SPP market. And by that, I mean, on a day ahead basis, Western Farmers offers generation, all of our generation that's available to the SPP market on a day ahead basis generally at our cost plus a small margin. And we only put a small margin on that because we'd like to guarantee that if we get selected in that market, we at least break even. SPP then selects the generation from the entire region that's been offered into the market. And then their selection is based on a market-wide unit commitment. It's not necessarily the cheapest, every unit's the cheapest units in the region. It's the day ahead commitment is the cheapest solved solution for that day. And it may include a lot of cheap units, and it may include a lot of several higher cost units to fill in the load curve of the Southwest Power Pool. After that, Western Farmers purchases 100% of all our load from that market. So the generation and the load that you purchase is kind of unhinged. And you'll see days where we get nothing selected and we purchase all of our load, and then you'll see days we get way more than our load selected. And so that's just based on the economics of the SPP market. And when you talk about served at the locational marginal price, that's at the load centers, and that's in New Mexico and in Oklahoma. There's roughly 300 or 400 load centers, and all that numbers are all generally a little bit different, and they're adjusted slightly to be different because they take into account losses and any congestion that the Southwest Power Pool has going on at the time. And so when we look at the cost of the market on a day of on a basically a monthly basis, we have a cost that SPP settles against us each week that makes up the monthly cost. And then we have the cost of our generation that we keep track of ourselves that goes on. And so when we look at the net of that, that equates to our monthly fuel cost to our members. And remember, Western Farmers is a wholesale power provider only. We don't provide any retail. And so these are the costs that we charge our four distribution members. And so when we look at that, we look at quite a ways ahead, like anyway, 12 to 18 months to look at what the SPP market's doing. And we use consultants to help us look at that. And as we look through the summer of 2026, we're basically looking at the fuel cost being relatively flat, a little bit higher in the August month because later in the summer the loads generally get a little bit bigger, and there's sometimes stress on not necessarily our generators but generators in the market. So fuel's a little bit higher, but our total wholesale power cost that includes fuel, all the capacity charges, all the transmission charges. This is the bill to our four members, and they'll all be a little bit different on the retail side because they all have slightly different retail rates. But we think our cost basically for this summer is going to be somewhere in the 6.7, 6.8 cents a kilowatt hour to our members. And that's consistent with basically where it was last summer and where it's likely to be in a year or two going forward. So we've got a lot of consistency in that. And if you go to the next slide, we do some things that basically try to flatten these numbers so that we don't see spikes and we don't see peaks and anything else. On our natural gas, we have a fairly significant hedging program that we use that basically 23 GNTs have got together and formed a ACES Power Marketing in Indianapolis, and they help us do hedging and help us do natural gas delivery. But we hedge about 50% of our natural gas cost in the market at basically $1 above the cost when we put the hedge in. So if today the gas market's like $2.20, we might have put a hedge in for this period of the year. We don't hedge in the spring, but if we did, it'd be at like $3.09. So when you get to the summer, and we do this a year ahead to take advantage of sometimes a lower cost in the market. So I think we're hedged on our natural gas at about 50% of the hedge at probably somewhere in the mid $3 range, which is really pretty low. We also have significant natural gas storage. That is actual physical natural gas storage of 1 BCF that we can withdraw about 45 million cubic feet a day of gas from on a daily basis at the cost of storage. And we have about 650 million cubic feet in that today, which is kind of where you can't operate at the top and you can't operate at the bottom because natural gas storage has some parameters about it. So we think we have a lot of natural gas that we fix the price on if we want to use, if the market moves. If the market stays cheap, we're not going to use it. We're going to save it for winter. But so we do a lot of hedging. We have about 600,000 tons of coal on the ground at our coal plant, which is about 100 days, is at a fixed price. And I think our coal generation generates at something right below 3 cents a kilowatt hour at the price of coal we've got into it. And so looking at the forward prices, the things we see that might impact it is if the SPP market as a totality sees a lot of increase in natural gas, it'll raise the price of the market some. But outside of that, we're not at risk for generation because, as Dave said, before the summer season started, by meeting all the SPP requirements, that if for some reason one of our units trips offline, we're covered by the SPP market and don't have to provide additional capacity or anything else. We're covered for the summer season, which is one of the advantages of being in that market. About everybody protects everybody else during these seasons. So I think outside of transmission congestion, what we see, some of those things, that we're in a period right now, at least in 2026, and likely the next year or two where we think we're looking at quite a lot of consistency in our wholesale power cost to our members. And I think it's fair to say that our members in New Mexico probably have the lowest retail prices in New Mexico. So we'll be glad to answer any questions about anything that we've presented.
Well, thank you. That was very informative, and I appreciate the explanations on your energy prices and hedging strategy. Commissioners, do you have any questions? No. I wanted to check with staff to see if staff has any questions for either of the two presentations we've had. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so thank you for those presentations. And yes, to answer your question about whether you provided what we were looking for, yes, and very much appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we'll have El Paso Electric Company. Welcome. Thank you for traveling up for the presentation. I'll turn the floor over to you and you can please introduce yourselves.
There we go. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is David Hawkins. I am the Vice President of Operations Support, El Paso Electric. With me is Jaime Reyes, who's Manager of Energy Resources. And start off, go next slide, please. Just giving you a little bit of background. Obviously, we serve our customers across 2 states. Approximately 20% of our customers are in New Mexico, 80% in Texas. And we are tied, we're sort of at the cul-de-sac of the Western Interconnection. We have 3 interties with the West, 2 with Tucson Electric, 1 with PNM. Primarily constructed with Palo Verde when that came online, and then when El Paso Electric was part of the Four Corners generation. And then we have, additionally to the east, our DC intertie, which we're taking tender care of to get us through the summers and the next few summers. We are about 630 megawatts nameplate, nuclear, 1,500 natural gas, and the remainder comes from solar and battery PPAs, as well as occasionally purchase power. We have some units that are, been told it's more impressive if I say Eisenhower era than actually saying 1957, but we have some units that are the 1950s, 1960s still. So we rely on those units. Our loads are typically summer peaking, obviously, and winter peak is about 40 to 50% of our summer peaking load. Next slide, please. So last summer, 2025, it was slightly milder than the previous summer and slightly below where we had forecasted the summer to be. One of our resources, Rio Grande 6, which is 1956-57, basically surrendered itself for the remainder of where it was. It was originally planned to be abandoned in 2014. We had relied on that unit up through last summer, and we don't anticipate that unit coming back. But despite that, we went through the summer with no real reliability issues. And I think for the most part, it was overall a smooth summer as far as our participation in the markets and serving load and being able to find resources when needed. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we are a summer peaking utility. So in the summer, we've noticed that our load and our peak hour over the last, say, 5 to 10 years has shifted. We used to peak clock time between 3 and 4 p.m. And we've noticed the last few years that sliding to between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. in the evening. So as we have recently added batteries to our fleet, so as the solar is decreasing in that 5 to 6 hour, we're relying more on battery storage to help us meet our peak loads. In the winter, obviously the sun is down. We're an evening peaking winter utility, so we rely mainly on our gas peaking resources. For the most part, winter is fairly mild in El Paso. Our load can be pretty flat. It's mostly lighting load in the evening. People get home from work, kitchen load. Occasionally people will turn on their heaters later on in the evening, but for the most part, our winter load is pretty mild and manageable. There are times where you can, because that's the same time we take resources off for maintenance. From a resource load perspective, on a cold day, winter days can look like summer days as far as having enough resources to meet load. Next slide, please.
I have one question. It's actually on the second slide. Yeah, right there. When the numbers that we're looking at here, do these include any planning reserve margin? Or is this
This is just pure load.
okay? And so with respect to a planning reserve addition, you would presumably need more than 40 megawatts of capacity.
Correct. So this is really just reflective of load and not our resource position
Okay.
and where we were on our load. So our resources were actually north of there. I believe Mr. Reyes will talk about our operating reserves, but it's approximately 130, 140 megawatts of operating reserves on top of load that we'll need to meet the summer period. Go to slide 4. So as we look at our resource adequacy, we've been using effective load carrying capability as part of our planning reserve margin for, I'm guessing, close to 5 years now, as we introduced more solar resources onto our system. It's a better measurement of that variability and what we can count on. We have gone through an RFP recently to help look at future loads. We'll be going through an RFP in New Mexico, but the planning reserves margin is what we rely on as a metric for future load. But as we get into current load to current summer, we rely more on operating reserve margins. We actually, although we have 2 states and we have 2 different ideas of how resources should be brought to serve load, we do dispatch our system as a whole. We don't look at New Mexico load. We don't look at Texas load. We don't look at New Mexico versus Texas resources. It's all dispatched economically. Next slide.
Hey, sorry, Dave, just to add back to the ELCC, is that a ELCC for all resources?
We have been doing it for all resources, yeah.
And then does it include things like market purchases?
We have excluded, we don't have any long-term, I should say, we have long-term PPAs for solar and battery storage. Our LNR excludes purchases that we have not contracted for. So right now we don't have any contracted resources for. So to that extent, it's not going to show anything in our LNR as far as ELCC goes.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I guess where I was going was you were talking about, and it makes sense for the upcoming season, you're more focused on operating reserves. Does ELCC play into your operating reserve look at all? And then it would be opportunity to balance with the short-term market.
So our operating reserves are based more on the nameplate capacity and actually expected output. So not just nameplate, but any sort of seasonality due to temperature or due to any maintenance issues. But yes, The LCC is more on the planning basis.
All right, thank you.
Next slide, please. So what's different from last summer? We have additional resources coming on prior to this summer, which will give us additional capacity for this summer going into it. Towards the end of last summer, we had a solar battery project come online in September, which is the Milagro project that you see up there. We had another solar-only project, I believe that came online in October. Jaime, does that sound right? And right now we are going through commercial operation testing for the Carne project, which is solar battery. We've been receiving solar output from that resource since January. And we're currently going through the storage testing on that, but I expect that to be commercially available within the next week or two, would be my guess. And then additionally, on top of that, there is the Santa Teresa solar and battery project, which we anticipate to come online pre-summer 2026. So we're in a much better position resource-wise going into 2026.
You already heard my joke about summer started in March, right?
Yeah, I did hear that one. I chuckled, but it was just to myself. Yeah,
All
kept it in. Next slide. Turn it over to Jaime here.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Again, my name is Jaime Reyes, the Manager of Energy Resources. And what we see here on the slide is the lookout for the peak day that we expect this summer. Where we see a stack of generation, we'll start at the bottom. We'll see the base resources. These are the generators that Dave was mentioning that are a little bit older that we bring online earlier in the season, and we run through them throughout the season. That includes Newman 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Rio 7, and Rio 8. And so we stack those. Above that, you'll see our nuclear resources, Palo Verde. And then as we progress through the morning hours, through the sun hours, you'll see in yellow there our solar values. What we did here, as we increase the solar values, we put somewhat of an availability factor to it, about 62%, just so because operationally we want to make sure we account for that. And so altogether, we have a total, once those two new resources do come online, we have approximately 840 megawatts of nameplate solar capacity. We reduced them to about 62% based on historical output. That gives us a little bit of flexibility on the planning reserves, a little bit more conservative approach, right? So we can be prepared in case there is that deviation. If it doesn't dip below that 62%, it's only a plus. Stack on top of that, as we move into hour ending 12, you'll start seeing what we consider our peaker units, which is our quick start units. We stack those accordingly to meet our load. Dave mentioned earlier, we're starting to move more towards the hour ending 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock peaking, and you'll see that reflected there. What we are leveraging now is the 340 megawatts of battery capacity that we have. So as we see our solar forecast solar generation decrease, we'll start dispatching our batteries. So the idea behind the batteries is the morning hours, 7 through 10, 11, we'll be utilizing that solar output to charge our batteries and have them ready to go for the evening or later hours when solar starts to deviate there. And with discharging, we'll account for that as the load still oftentimes stays a little bit higher through, again, 16, 17, 18. On the right-hand side here, the table, you'll see our projected peak load of 2334. Our operating or contingency reserves are about 6% of our load. That takes us about, for our total obligations, around 2580 for this summer. With our projected solar, again, with that 62% reduction, we end up around 523. We have a Palo Verde resource at 583. And thermal generation, as Dave said, about 1500. Gives us a total capacity of around 2605. That gives us a position of around 25 megawatts. Operationally, we typically won't run it that close. We will more than likely go out in the market and secure some power, but just generation-wise, we look sufficient for the summer. Aside from that, our import limitation, total imports, that includes our PV resource and some of the solar facilities that do affect our import limitations leaves around 763. Our total import capability is around 1,100. So we do have some flexibility to go and secure power and purchase it and import it if the need were to arise. Next slide. So we see here the purchase power pricing that we see based off of Palo Verde index. We're forecasting mild pricing for June, and we see it kind of climb up July and August, about 60 megawatts and $60 a megawatt in August. Again, currently we don't foresee requiring a long-term purchase, but those are the prices that we would expect to see if the need were to arise. As far as gas is concerned, we're looking to burn around 260,000 MMBTUs on peak day. El Paso Electric's already secured 40K of that. We kind of hedge and we secure that on the April-October timeframe. So those are already secured and we're already flowing some of that. The summer pricing that you see here is based off of the 3 hubs that we typically purchase. So it's an average of all 3 future pricings. So we do see that the gas pricing does reflect similar to the market pricing as gas increase prices do as well. So the highest cost would be in August around 44 an MMBTU.
Yeah, and another question about that, because I mean, one of the cliches I learned in gas supply planning is the best cure for low prices is low prices. And so I was looking at like future basis strips, and it looked like at some point there was going to be takeaway capacity in the Permian that would bring that hub up to more what the rest of the market is seeing. But I'm not seeing that here. So when is that happening? When do you expect the hubs you buy from to get priced at market instead of constrained pricing?
We haven't seen a huge deviation. We ran these futures twice. We ran them in early March and again early April, and the price deviation between those two was very minimal. So far, there's nothing that dictates that those prices will be expected to change.
So you're not aware of any projects going on in the Permian that could change that?
So
dynamic?
as I understand, there was a pipeline put in from the Permian to an LNG terminal, which apparently had minimal effect on the gas prices. My understanding is that the gas prices are being driven by the cost of oil, and natural gas is just a byproduct of that. And as long as oil prices stay strong, I think we'll see continued heavy drilling and low price natural gas until additional transport is taken out of there. But on a longer term planning basis, I think we are, still looking at those $3 to $4 gas prices out of that area as opposed to what we've been seeing the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, you hit my question is when will additional transport get built?
Yeah, I don't have the answer on future pipeline, just was aware of the most recent one that went in.
And that must have been the one I saw 6 months ago when I was looking at basin.
That could have been that one. Yeah.
Next slide. Something we always consider as we move into summer to plan for is unexpected hot weather, particularly when we see compounding days. We expect to see that load to increase, and so we'll keep an eye on those, making sure that we stay on top and ahead of that heat wave coming in. Current gas prices are favorable, but again, the demand, the increase in load will reflect that in gas prices. So we stay on top of those and we work with our long-term trader to keep an eye on the outward-looking pricing. As always, for gas, we always look at hurricane season down in the Gulf. That typically tends to affect our pricing within our basins where we secure gas. So we'll keep a close eye on that. And then if we do see some hurricane heavy season, we'll modify our gas procurement strategies and secure some if the market prices dictate that. Again, similar hot weather, again, will drive those prices. So that's what we kind of look at as we move into our summer run. Hand it over back to Dave.
All right, next slide, please. We talk about potential risk to energy costs. When I think of this summer, I think more of the risks that we see are probably more longer term costs, but the immediate costs, as Jaime mentioned, natural gas prices, but where I also see the risk is if we were to lose one of our fossil fuel generating units that's burning negative price gas, and we have to make that up with purchased power, I think that's really the risk for this summer is taking something that's that we're being paid for to take the gas that our customers get that benefit of, and then losing that and going out on the market and buying at prices that he's shown at Palo Verde. As far as longer term prices, we are in the middle, or we're at the end of an RFP, and we are seeing price increases just generally across the board on the different technologies. We're seeing price increases on the cost of transmission, on the cost of transformers. And so I think it's more of a longer term risk on price increases than it is so much on the near term. Next slide, please.
So I have a question there.
Yep.
For the mention on the negative price of natural gas, isn't that where more battery energy storage could help?
If we are generating more, yeah, so we would generate more. The way you would take advantage for the battery is to generate more out of fossil fuel for it, right? Because the advantage is low gas. So yes, we could generate it when we don't need it for load, but in effect, battery becomes load. And so potentially, yeah. The problem is, as we forecast out in our resource plan, we're not projecting those negative prices to do that. And so you would assume that the battery is there for the most part, coming from co-located solar in our case. I didn't mention wind as a resource for us. We just, as base loaded, as Jaime's chart showed, we're primarily base loaded with nuclear, with must-run gas. Wind would otherwise be a great resource for standalone battery and charging those as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point is, if you have a generator that you would essentially be paid to run, and then you have other generation that does not have any fuel costs, ideally you'd be able to do both.
Well, it's an interesting, I don't want to get too far from it, but it's something that negative natural gas, what does that incentivize you to do? It incentivizes you to run your least efficient gas resources, right? It's the ones that you should normally be shutting down. And so, you balance that, the environmental issues with running a resource that has twice the heat rate of another resource. Does it benefit customers? Maybe on the short term, but our least efficient resources, you have to run 24 hours a day. There is that trade-off, and I don't think we're comfortable making that trade-off, that's something we should be doing. But
okay, yeah, that's a good point. I wasn't thinking about the runtime. Thank you.
sure.
There was another.
I'm sorry?
You're talking about steamers?
Our boiler convention generators, yeah. We go next slide. So again, what are potential risks? We've talked about Rio Grande 6, which last year sort of ended its run. Newman 1, we don't expect for this summer as well. That's 1961, 62. There were some equipment problems on that one. And so Jaime's chart actually excluded that resource as well. Again, it's aging resources. We don't foresee any issues to this point with those other resources. We're going through our summer prep programs now. Talked about the solar and battery resources that we expect to come online. There could be some risk if there's delays in those, but like we said, we're pretty comfortable that the Carne project will be available to us this month, and nothing that would indicate that Santa Teresa is going to be delayed before this summer run. We always run the risk of load being higher than we anticipated. Currently for the year, I think we're sort of right on where we forecasted our load to be. So, assuming much higher summer, much more days running together of high temperatures, there's potential risk of those spikes in load. Next slide. So as well, we want to talk about some of the communications we've had with stakeholders, with the commission recently. We filed our quarterly and annual reports on the Carne project. We recently, the commission approved or accepted EPE's 2025 IRP, and we're following the processes that go along with that. It was a very good process as far as stakeholder communication for El Paso. And from that, we will be doing a pilot project on demand side energy resources for up to 5 megawatts. That was big for the people who were attending our meetings and really pushing for those. So we're going to take a look at that and make an effort to get that going in our service territory. Other than that, we will be issuing, we're in the process of going through the RFP process and expect to issue RFP in June. And we're wrapping up an all source RFP that we had for Texas currently. So from there, we'll be going into contract negotiations, whatever projects were selected from there. That's all we have for our presentation, I believe, but we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I want to go to slide. Let me find it. I guess maybe slide 6. There's no really perfect slide here. Let me just ask my question instead. How would participation in the RAP, the Resource Adequacy Program, when EP joins Market Plus, how would that affect the numbers here in your presentation on the from the resource side?
Well, from the RAP participation, EPE in its long-term planning was already planning to go to the reliability metrics that's used by RAP. And so, which is the 1 in 10-year loss of load expectation, which is the RAP requirement. Long-term, as we go into that market, I think it's what we plan for, but what really means, and I think what your question is, does that mean more generation resources to satisfy that? And it does, or, it could be energy efficiency, demand side response, all those things that potentially give you options to help meet those planning reserves. But I think as far as the operating reserves, which is what we see here on slide 6, we are already part of, I don't know if you want to touch on this, the Northwest or the WPP.
Yeah, so we are part of the WPP where it requires us to carry the 6% reserve margin. And so we always plan with that 6% operationally day to day.
Yeah, and I guess I was looking to see if there was a capacity amount that you would expect to meet the requirements, which is, as you noted, the 1 in 10.
On the planning reserve basis, I think, under our current planning reserves, we're at about 9.9% from a planning reserve, and I think it would go up to roughly 11.9, so up maybe 2% on a planning reserve basis. So whatever multiple that is of firm demand, where we would be at that time. Might be 70, 80 megawatts, I'm guessing, total system.
Okay. Thank you. for the presentation. Does staff have any questions? Not seeing any. So thank you. Thank you for, coming up to provide the presentation.
Sure.
And for the information you've given us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we have Excel, Southwestern Public Service Company. So thank you also for making the drive.
Yeah.
Oh, the floor is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for having us today. My name is J. Rich Sparks. I am the regulatory manager for SPS in the New Mexico jurisdiction. With me today, I have Justin Gable, the director of resource planning for SPS. Jeremiah Cunningham did plan to be here today, but due to unforeseen circumstances, he couldn't join us, but he does send his regards to all of you. So I'll breeze through these first few slides just to give you an overview of SPS. So in the New Mexico jurisdiction, we have approximately 128,000 electric customers. I think the last time that we gave this presentation, that we were sitting at approximately 125,000 customers. We do maintain a electric reliability rating of 99.97%. I believe we've maintained that rate for the past 5 to 6 years. Next slide, please.
Actually, I do have a question on that slide.
Sure.
I've not seen this logo before, which I like. Has that been around a while and I've just missed it?
So we just went through a branding campaign, I want to say a year ago, maybe.
It was about a year ago, but they provided us a lot of really interesting graphics that were much more localized. So I agree with you. I think the New Mexico branding is very nice. So
yep, have specific ones for Texas, Piesco, Colorado, all that. So yeah, I'll relay that message. So here you can see the entirety of our service territory. It encompasses both New Mexico and Texas. So I'm sure you know, we are a multi-jurisdictional utility, but we are planned and operated as one single system. Next slide, please. So here you see the SPP RTO footprint that spans from Mexico up to Canada, and we are in the very southern or southwest peninsula of the RTO. Next slide, please. So this slide is a makeup of our New Mexico sales by class. This was done from a study about mid-2024 to mid-2025. As you can see, our large commercial and industrial customers make up the vast majority of our kilowatt hour sales. Like the other utilities or the other IOUs, we are a summer peaking utility, but we hum at a pretty high load factor at all times due to the large customer or large commercial and industrial customer makeup. Next slide, please. The small commercial, yes. Yes, though, yeah, large CNI is mainly the industrial, like refineries, oil and gas, midstream, everything like that. So this slide shows our current generation resources on the SPS footprint. It also is overlaid with the generation resources in our pending CCNs and PPA cases. So, what this slide entails is we're basically going to have to double the capacity generation resources by 2030. At this point, we have a nameplate capacity of approximately 6 gigawatts, and you can see by 2030, we're going to get close or need to get close to approximately 11 gigawatts. Next slide, please. So we'll get into the summer preparedness information here. So SPS is positioned well going into summer 2026. The main factor for that position is the CHR or Crossroads Hobbs Roadrunner dual circuit 345 transmission line. That is scheduled to be in service before it was originally planned, May 15th in service date. It will drastically increase our transfer capability into that southeast load pocket in New Mexico. Another key factor is SPS's addition of UVLS or under voltage load shed equipment that was installed last spring at various load points in southeast New Mexico, which will also drastically mitigate voltage instability in the region. And last but not least, SPS has been working with the Southwest Power Pool Reliability Coordinator to approve the SPS Generation Standing Op Guide. And basically what that means is they will not approve generation maintenance outages that are overlapping. So it gives us a lot more predictability in that aspect. So in conclusion, obviously there's risk in our system. We're planning for that. We're mitigating for that. We're studying that. But our assessment shows that multiple concurrent contingencies would have to be taken place in order to drastically impact our system. And by that, I mean, a unit would have to trip offline. We would have to have very unfavorable weather, or we would have to lose a major transmission line all at the same time.
Yeah, just a quick question on that. Generation standing op guide, was that the solution to or response to the outage last spring? And
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then this transmission line, I thought we'd gotten a message that said it was online already. Is that right?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to make sure I knew there was one, but
Yeah.
when you were saying it'll be there soon and I heard it was already here, just make sure it was the same thing.
Yeah.
I think it's energized to Hobbs, but maybe not the last leg yet. But it's supposed to be in the next week or so.
Yes, sir.
No more bucket trips for you then.
All right, and I'll hand it over to Justin now.
Thanks, Rich. So what we're showing on the screen right now is our LNR table. Right now we're in the middle of our IRP process right now. So we've been actively working on our load forecast assumptions. Right now, the load forecast assumptions here are subject to change as we're making sure that we're adapting that the underlying metrics. So we'll have more conversations on that on April 30th in our third stakeholder meeting. But right now, this is our preliminary LNR. You can see in summer 26, we're expected to have 90 megawatts long. That represents a long position with the 7% PRM. It's actually 7.06% PRM from SPP. It also incorporates some of our additional resources, solar and battery resources that were selected from the 22 RFP. And we'll get into those conversations a little bit later. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So what we have here, traditionally, we've always provided the 2025, or sorry, the historic average LMPs for the day-ahead market as a projection for summer 26. I went ahead and just right-sized these and made sure that they were in alignment with our summer 26 projections, and they generally align. Right now, we're expecting between $36 and $48 per megawatt hour, which fairly aligns with what the 2025 actuals were. The next slide, please. Just to give some historic perspective on our market sales and purchases, this is the last 5 years of total market sales and purchases in either day ahead of market and real time. You can see that prior to 2024, we were a net seller into the market. The last 2 years, we've been a net purchaser into the market. There's a, do we expect that trend to change in the future? Potentially. I don't have more information to be able to provide on future projections though, but this is where we at historically for the last 5 years, is that we flip-flop between purchase and sales. Next slide, please. Just some potential risks. Most of the same risks that other utilities have already identified with pricing. The natural gas prices that we're seeing or that we're expecting are very aligned with the other utilities. Henry Hub, around 350. There's some other forecasts that we're seeing negative gas pricing as well. Not necessarily into the summer, but very close to $1. So, very, very low gas pricing. Renewable energy production can change. We generally see very good production from our wind resources. Other things that could possibly be affecting is demand, weather forecasting specifically. Last year, 2025, we did do an under forecast as well. It was those numbers aren't weather normalized, but we were under forecast by almost 200 megawatts. And that has changed from time to time, but that was an under forecast last year. Other things that could be considered: congestion, environmental compliance costs, things like that. Some of our units do have operating limits associated with dispatch. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned earlier on our L&R table, we do have a number of resources that we were expecting to be added this year, which are great since we were at 90 megawatts long. These resources are helping to make sure that we're in a long position. 150 megawatts of the solar at Plant X 1 and 2, 72 megawatts of solar plus 36 megawatts of battery storage at the Cunningham Unit 1. And then next year, we were expecting to also be bringing on the 196 megawatts of solar at Cunningham Unit 2. So together, the resources are about 280 megawatts, adding up accredited capacity for the summer, with which, if we did not have those approvals, we would be short. All right, next slide, please. So this just kind of gives us a general timeline on where we're at on the resources that we've previously approved that we are relying on for the summer, and then also the 24 RFP results. So right now, like I said, we started this year with our 26 IRP. We are expecting to have the third stakeholder meeting at the end of April 30th. Because we're a multi-jurisdictional utility, we're also expanding some of those stakeholder meetings. So we're adding some Texas-specific stakeholder meetings. So the IRP process we're expanding that. We found that the New Mexico process was a good planning process that we're trying to make sure that we're getting also our Texas stakeholders engaged in that process as well. And we're expecting to file that in October of this year. And just a review of the 24 RFP portfolio. We don't have to spend too much time on this as it doesn't affect the summer of 26, but we do have a number of approvals that we're looking forward to. And we also have the 4 existing unit extensions of 521 megawatts between Nichols 1, Nichols 2, Maddox 1, and Plant X 4. All right, the next slide, please. We, as a participant in the SPP market, I wanted to provide some more information on the deficiency payment and how that will work. So in the next few years, the PRM has been changing, and when the PRM is changing, there's a different methodology for calculating the deficiency payment, and it's called the sufficiency evaluation curve. The cone, the cost of new entry, which is the deficiency payment, that in 26 was was updated to $139.85. So that represents the benchmark point. When you are in the sufficiency evaluation curve, you actually pay what they call net cone. So that would put you at $118. That's what we're estimating right now. And then ultimately, what you would end up paying for a deficiency payment is partially a function of the overall market position across the Southwest Power Pool. Our current projections show that the predicted clearing price, based upon the market position that we saw in 2025, to be around $106 per kW year. So that's the maximum that you could pay. Sorry, my mic keeps cutting out. The maximum you could be expected to pay is $279.70 per kW year. There has been some discussions at the Southwest Power Pool Supply Adequacy Working Group about the frequency of updating the cone. It had been a substantially long amount of time since the cone had been updated. Before this $139.85, it was set to around $86. So pretty significant change. And that's partially just because of the amount of time that had passed between updates to the cone.
Just question I've had on the cone for 3 years now is when I look at that $140 kilowatt year, divide it by 15% fixed charge rate, it isn't even close to the, say, $2,200 a kilowatt that it costs to build a new capacity, gas generator. So what's the point of it? I mean, it really looks like the incentive here would be pay the cone because way more expensive to build something new. And then the cone money doesn't go to incent new capacity. It's just a slush fund that gets spread out among people who didn't pay the cone, right?
Excuse me. You're correct. I mean, it is kind of spread out amongst the other utilities or other LREs, load responsible entities. As the market position is decreasing, and over the next 5 years, it's projected to go negative if there was not any utilities that were building new generation resources. So you would see closer to higher $279.70 per kW a year. But I do think that, yes, and I think that that's part of the idea about making sure that the cone payment continues to be updated regularly and matching publicly available data. So there have been some conversations about maybe even an annual frequency on updating the cone payment and maybe updating the publicly available information that they're utilizing to calculate the cone. So this is what it's set to today, but it is subject to change.
Yeah, I mean, my problem is I don't see how it incents anything, right? It's either a cheap penalty or, I mean, it just doesn't. Why does it exist is really my big thing. It doesn't seem to do anything to, it's related to whether you had capacity or not, but it does nothing to ensure the region has capacity is the way I've understood it, thinking about it in terms of, is it an incentive? No. Is it a penalty? Cheap penalty. I'd rather pay that than build something new.
I hear your sentiment, Commissioner. I think that's if the decision is to pay the deficiency payment or not, it's really kind of a secondary issue as compared to maintaining the 0.1 LOLE for reliability. So yes, how this may not necessarily be the deterrent that it should be, but I think that all of the LREs in the SPP market are striving to maintain their plan reserve margins to maintain the reliability for their customers.
Yeah, so I mean, within SOG working group, is there any conversation around this is dumb, let's try something else? I mean, what you said was just, hey, let's change the number. And that's what I'm afraid of is that once you build an institution like this, you just keep pushing the rope. You don't ever recognize, well, this isn't doing anything. What we really need done is something else. So let's change it. Again, my experience with SPP and I'm bringing this up because we're heading into all these regional markets out west, is let's stick with the familiar and then just move the deck chair around the ship rather than let's try to be better and build a grid that matches the problem that we have today.
I understand.
So what's the incentive within SOG to think beyond, hey, let's set a different number for this thing that seems kind of silly?
I would say that from my conversations at SOG, that conversation has not happened. But I appreciate you bringing that up. I do think that that's something that we can engage on and have a conversation with other members. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't calculated any of this, but on this paper, but it might not be enough from a capacity perspective. I think in a different context with respect to energy, and if you're not supplying enough, I think the incentive that it has is for those that do, who end up receiving, for those units that do perform, who end up receiving an additional payment. And so anyway, I've seen this in the context of energy where it does work for your requirement to actually show up into the market.
Makes more sense.
I do think that there has been some discussions upon exactly how proceeds from paying a deficiency payment would be distributed to more align with the people who are bringing the capacity. So those conversations have happened, but it hasn't been necessarily a wholesale conversation change. But there has been at least an acknowledgement that the capacity should be those that are providing excess capacity should be the first in line to receive payments from the deficiency calculations. Next slide, please. All right. So this just gives us a general makeup and mix. So summer 26 over on the far left of the graph, and then also our resource mix. You can see that in summer 26, around 31 megawatts of 4-hour batteries. But by the time that we get to 2032, those numbers should be expanding to 692 megawatts. And that this is based on ELCC accreditation, or our best estimates on the ELCC accreditation for across SPP system for the summer. Now, these numbers are subject to change once those resources actually go into the market, and we have actual accreditation values for them. So yeah, another interesting note on the graphic is also the reduction of coal starting in 2029. So I think that probably wraps us up on our slides.
Commissioners, any other questions? Yeah.
Alert, all over the room.
No, I'm just looking at slide 16 and the accredited capacity versus the resource adequacy requirement. Those numbers or the differences seem to be getting bigger.
As in the short position?
Yeah, the adequacy requirement is getting to be quite a bit bigger than the accredited capacity, and it would seem like those numbers ought to be closer together, or you would want them to be closer together.
I agree. We currently have issued a 25 RFP. If we go to an earlier slide, it may be slide 7 or 8. Keep on. There we go. It's the LNR table. So that same information you're looking at is probably, you can see in 2032, we have a negative 1,470 position. So like many utilities, we're seeing a substantial amount of load growth expectations on our system. So yes, we do have that RFP. We are seeking additional resources between 2030 and 32.
So on 16, the accredited capacity does not reflect any potential new generation that you'd like to add.
That's correct. It does not reflect generic resources in it.
Does staff have any questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Nanny in Albuquerque.
Jared.
Yeah.
All right, next we have PNM to present and turn the floor over to you. Thank you for being here.
There we go. All right, good afternoon, Chairman Aguilera, Commissioners O'Connell and Nybert. Thank you for the opportunity to present PNM's Summer 2026 Operational Readiness Update. My name is Lori Williams. My role at PNM is Senior Vice President over our Integrated Planning and Transmission Development. With me, I have Steve Maestas, who's our Director of Wholesale Power Marketing. Today, we'll walk through our comprehensive summer preparedness plan. We'll be covering our resource portfolio, peak demand forecast, dispatch strategy, new resource additions, and our wholesale projections. All of this is designed to ensure reliable service for our nearly 550,000 customers across New Mexico over the summer months. Our key message here today is PNM's taken deliberate proactive steps to ensure we're well positioned to meet the summer's peak demand reliably and safely. All right, so moving to slide 2. So looking across the overview of our system, PNM's prepared to meet the summer 2026 peak load on a seasonal operations basis with the planned resource additions we've made. Our resource portfolio has added 600 megawatts of new installed resource and storage since the summer of 2025. And on top of that, we have 48 megawatts of new community solar expected to be in service prior to the summer of 26. That will continue throughout the year, but that's what we know we can count on starting at the end of May. Our hourly and daily additional needs will meet through the wholesale energy market on an as-needed basis. The summer 2026 fuel cost projections still appear reasonable, but subject to potential risks of price changes, off-system sales, and expected use. So moving to the next slide. One of the things I want to point out in 2025, we actually hit 80% carbon-free in our operations, something we're really proud of, so we'll continue to build on that. Of those new resources that are being added or have been added since the summer of 2025, they are largely solar energy and battery storage. For summer 2026, our operating plan, we expect a peak load of about 2,250 megawatts. You can see that on the bar on the left-hand side of the graph. For our resource stack, we've added together all of our resources on both a combined ICAP and UCAP basis. So that's both an installed capacity number for thermal resources and a UCAP basis for our renewable resources. If you were to take it on strictly an ICAP basis, we're at about 122% reserve margin. But on the ICAP basis mixed with UCAP, we'll be at about 12.5% for the summer. We expect, you can see our last highest peak load demand at 2131. expecting the 2250. So we should be well positioned for the summer. One of the things I'd like to point out about our resource stack for the upcoming summer is that the Lordsburg units, two basically 41 megawatt aeroderivative resources will be unavailable for the summer. They have hit their 25,000 hour operation and need to go for the overhaul, kind of an on-site overhaul. So that will be taking place this year. There's a bit of a backlog in the overhaul GE facilities. So we expect those to not return to service until after the summer of 26. All right, so moving to the off-peak look, which is the next slide. Off-peak, our expected peak is about 1623. Again, our resources will far exceed that. We've shown the hours where solar is no longer available in off-peak. So we're at about a 42% reserve margin, kind of meaningless, but I'll take you through what a full typical day looks like. We'll give credit to El Paso Electric for this next slide. We love their graphics, so we stole it. We have an example in Compass modeling dispatch. So we're trying to give you a look at a dispatch day for our peak day that we expect in July of this year. So you can see based on what we expect to be the dispatch order, you can see how we are serving that load in every hour of the day and the additional margin that's available in every hour of the day, along with when we expect to charge our batteries. We'll be at 1,000 megawatts or so of battery energy storage on our 2,000 plus megawatt peaking system. So a significant amount of storage. So we're now getting to a point where that's really a significant load to make sure that we are factoring into our daily operations. So we typically will discharge those overnight. You can see that in hours, starting in hours 17 through about 24. That will vary depending on the day and what's available. We will typically use our demand side resources in those risk hours. You can see that in our hours 18, 19 through 21. We have our nuclear that will be available all of the hours of the day. That's followed by our continued interest in Four Corners. That will be there until at least 2031. Our wind, our solar, and then our gas would be the last to fill in the gaps as we need it in those various hours. Okay, next slide. Taking a look ahead for integrated planning. We're in the process of our 2026 IRP right now. We've had 5 of our facilitated stakeholder processes. That's a total of a 9-month process that we're undertaking. So we expect to file that in the September of 2026. This body has already approved resource additions for us in 2027 and 28 that total about 1,205 megawatts. Those are 30 megawatts of distribution-sided battery, 390 megawatts of additional solar, another 600 plus megawatts of battery energy storage, and the continued operations of the Valencia power plant to cover in hours where we do not have sufficient firm generating resource. So those are basically 390 megawatts of carbon-free energy, 648 megawatts of dynamic balancing resources, and that 167 of firm generating resource. As a preview for our 2029 through 2032 RFP, which we issued about a year plus ago, we are determined to make sure that we have resources installed by the dates that we need them. That is requiring a lot more advanced planning than it used to, but given supply chains and other things. We are attempting to get in under the wire for the expiring federal tax credits and file a number of resources that will qualify for those phase outs and be safe harbored under the federal tax credits. But the big Objectives that we have with the upcoming 29 through 32 resources are to provide a little bit more diversity into our portfolio. We've gotten pretty heavy solar and for our battery recently, so you'll see some other things there. Making sure that affordability is maximized here. We're trying to balance affordability, reliability, and environmental impact. There'll be about 2,000 plus megawatts in that portfolio. It is expected to achieve a 200 pounds per megawatt hour carbon intensity. We have successfully come in under 400 pounds. We'll continue to operate at that point, but be ready to lower that carbon intensity to 200 pounds by 2032. We're also going to address the long-term approaches on both Four Corners and Reeves. Each were at the near end of life or end of contract timeframes, so we are contemplating that. It will enable load growth, including economic development. We expect to provide for an extra 200 megawatts of resource margin under Senate Bill 170 as a part of that, as well as issue a supplemental RFP in the next couple of weeks. The hope there is to not only allow folks who were in the original RFP to be contemplated, but see if it's possible to find any more affordable resources for customers that may help with the overall cost. All of this, again, will be in full compliance with the Energy Transition Act, including carbon intensity, our ability to meet the milestones. We're well ahead of those. I think we're meeting the 2040 milestone about now. So lots of progress has been made, but more work is needed. All right, I'm going to pass it to Steve to talk through market prices in the summer.
Well, actually, I think that was already covered by the other utilities, but so the next slide. So want to talk about our expectations for the upcoming summer and our operational needs of our system and our portfolio. I'm quite convinced and confident that the PNM system is very capable of meeting our peak demand load for the year, and that is with no wholesale market purchases this year. We finally got ahead of the curve with the additional resources that were brought online. You know, I was looking back last year in what we had in our portfolio versus what we have coming up in 2026. Last year, for the summer, we had roughly 300 megawatts of 4-hour battery. In addition to that, we had 300 megawatts of 4-hour battery that we were as well commissioning to go COD. So we basically were able to lean on those batteries as we were testing those out for charge and discharge to count on as well. So they, for the most part, were in our portfolio, which they helped. We also had, if you recall, up to 250 megawatts of wholesale firm purchases that we had procured to cover our evening peak load. This year, no purchases are needed. Like Lori mentioned, we're at 12% reserve margin. The market appears to be flush. Looking out at other industry, even like in the state of California, and reading up on what their expectations are for the summer. Granted, their summer outlook is going to come out in early May, but early expectations are that they are going to have more than enough reserves to meet their load, and I think they're planning reserves and be close to 30% for the upcoming summer. And they typically peak in September, whereas the West, Arizona, New Mexico, we typically tend to peak in July. Granted, last year was an exception. We peaked in early August, if you guys recall, because of the weather patterns we had. So I think the summer of last year was, for the most part, mild to at normal. This upcoming summer, I think, is expected to be actually maybe a little bit more mild. I think we're calling for quite a bit more precipitation in June and July, some cooler temps in the Southwest and even in California. So from what we're seeing, we don't anticipate any kind of west-wide extreme heat event occurring. I'm not seeing that. Again, those are forecasts, so they can change. But knock on my head too. We are looking good. Again, so one thing that, I'm proud to say with me and my team is now with the portfolio that we have in hand, it's quite a unique position that any utility in the West has in terms of the amount of renewables that we have on our system, as well as batteries. When you compare it to our load, We have gotten greatly accustomed to how we manage our solar position as well as our wind and how we balance to that, as well as the access that we have on the system and how we have been utilizing the batteries to serve the peak hours, but more so even across other hours when we have enough capacity on the system to meet the peak, as well as other hours when we are kind of deficient. So we've gotten quite accustomed and our team has gotten great at managing that. In addition to that, we have other markets that we're involved in Western EIN, we're involved in that. So that helps us with balancing of if our excess or even sometimes if we're deficient. And as we step into next year, not sure if it was El Paso dimension or it might have been Tri-State, where, we're going down the realm of joining EDAM at some point in the fall of 2027. So we're starting out with that process right now and currently getting onboarded to be ready for that market as well. Next slide.
Yeah, I do want to note one thing, because you're right that this resource portfolio is different than last year, but if you go even just to 2023, it is drastically different, and the battery especially. How much would you have had in 2023? I guess when you
Gotta think back.
If the resources would have been online on time versus.
No, I
being
mean,
delayed.
what was the how much in terms of megawatts did you have of battery energy storage that was operational at that
In
time?
2023, we had 0 battery.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe there was like a 12 megawatt or
I'm not sure.
I don't think the
No,
distribution side of battery
those didn't
was
come
okay.
on
That was
until
later.
2024. Yeah, so we didn't have no battery in 2023. I think as I recall, we had, I want to say it was 400 to maybe 450 megawatts of wholesale firm purchases that we had to go out and procure to bring a reserve margin, I think up to 10% at the time, based on our projected peak demand. And I think 2023 is still our peak year that we've peaked out at. So.
I think the San Juan replacement experience has given us PTSD. We will never, ever be there again.
and actually maybe this was you, Lori, who mentioned, I don't remember who it was, but refining how you use the batteries. Can you just elaborate on that? Like what lessons, I guess, or what have you identified that is more of an optimal use of the batteries?
I think the one learning that we have is we typically attempt to try to keep at least 100 to 150 megawatts of state of charge. It might be more this summer because of the loss of the Lordsburg units, for helping the reliability group maintain their contingency reserve requirements to carry for flex ramp on the system that is required by EIM, as well as by our RC. There's so much reserves we have to carry. So in order to make it recover from contingencies, as well as just to help manage especially wind when at nighttime, more so than daytime. As for learnings, I mean, our system is quite simple and easy to manage when we're going to charge and discharge, because we are so flush with solar energy during the day that we are running no gas whatsoever, with the exception of Luna. Luna typically is loaded at the bottom, and we basically bring all of our other gas units offline, especially in the spring. And I think I mentioned this last year as well. In the spring and fall is when we typically have our most struggling times of balancing the system, because we're so flush with renewables. But we've gotten accustomed to it, and we're leaning on EIM more so. But again, it's easy to know what hours we're going to be charging the battery, because we have more than enough batteries on our solar on our system to charge it. It's really more a matter of when do we discharge it. So we've learned how to manage how much across the evening peak in terms of maintaining state of charge, as well as looking at the other off-peak hours when we typically don't have enough thermal generation on the grid, not enough wind blowing to meet our load at nighttime. So we typically have actually been holding on to a greater state of charge into the early morning hours, where we will maybe discharge it around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, leading up to the sun rising again, where we can begin charging the battery. So again, it doesn't take a scientist to figure out when's the most optimal time to charge the battery as well as discharge. It's quite simple in our system, just the way that we're configured.
Yeah, you'll be seeing some longer duration storage coming up as well. I don't want to talk too much about that filing, but we will be delving into a greater period of storage timeframe that'll help us as well.
Yeah, so maybe one other final fact on summer 2026, as I mentioned, we were counting on 600 megawatts of batteries in 25. For this upcoming summer, we should have commissioned close to 1,000 megawatts of 4-hour batteries. So it's going to be a great help to the system. Okay, next slide. Talk about cost projections and risks on the P&M system. So we use our Aurora model that we use for budgeting to estimate what we anticipate our cost to be for this upcoming summer season. And just looking at that, we didn't put in here what is the average dollar per megawatt hour, but basically our average cost, we would anticipate, assuming that our customer load comes in where we anticipate, we're talking it's going to be in the range of $21 as low as $17 per megawatt hour. It varies by month, but prices are low, and I think a lot of the other utilities already touched on some of the risks associated with what could occur in market prices. Right now we are seeing negative gas prices in the Permian Basin that we do tend to optimize as much as we can. And we do have some constraints, as you all know, in terms of how we manage to our emissions output, in terms of ensuring that we maintain that no more than 400 pounds per megawatt hours. We're doing it. It's a easier task now that we're past the 3-year point and we started a new 3-year cycle. So it's easier to do. But again, the risk to these numbers has to do with if market prices blow out or come in. I mean, if prices come in lower, and we do anticipate we will have opportunity to make a lot of off-system sales, especially during the daylight hours or during most summer days when it's not so hot. We anticipate we're going to be pushing a lot of power into the market. But if prices stay soft, off-system revenue may not be as high as we anticipate from what these numbers reflect, or unit performance. I mean, I think we've been fortunate last summer, units for the most part performed. This upcoming summer, as you know, Luna GT2 has been unavailable for quite a while because of the transformer that blew up. It should be coming operational now in mid-May. As Laurie mentioned, both Lordsburg, the Elm 6000s are going to be unavailable because there's a lot of damage to their turbine blades that need to go out to get replaced. That's an unfortunate issue, and we're going to be surely missed that. So we're going to have to think about how we're going to manage our needs for reliability in terms of how much state of charge we carry in the batteries, especially at night, because that's typically when we like to use those LM6000s. So, purchase power. I mean, right now we're going to be balancing to the system for any additional incremental needs as if there is a need, but I don't anticipate. I see P&M being more on the long side versus being on the short side for a change, which is kind of nice. And then, as I mentioned earlier, depending on where load comes in, if it is a mild summer, there's a good chance that our load projections for what we have budgeted for our customer demand may not be as high as we think, but that's all I got.
All right, we'll close out with our last slides here. So this commission is aware there's been quite a few stakeholder engagements leading up to all of this. So we continue to hold every 2 weeks a stakeholder meeting. All of our IRP stakeholders participate in that. That really has become a much broader than discussing IRP or resource topics exclusively. A lot of engagement with stakeholders on upcoming new filings, timing, making people aware of things like the transmission lines that we filed for CCN and other things that we're doing. So there's broad awareness of what's happening with the utility. And obviously folks are sharing their opinions and their perspectives with us, which has really created a lot of great relationships and understanding. To date, we've filed 49 reports on both the San Juan and Palo Verde resources. We halted those recently, but that has been since we last reported to you. And then commission and stakeholder inquiries and feedback from all sources really continue to be helpful to us. We've been very active in the IRP process, held 5 stakeholder meetings thus far, and a number of what we're calling office hours, which are very specialized groups of people to talk about specific topics. Like we previewed our nodal modeling, talked about how we're doing transmission, DC transmission overlay against our production cost modeling to try to move the sophistication of our IRP modeling forward. So those kinds of specialty meetings, we're doing 2 to 3 a month between the facilitated process meetings. Our facilitator obviously is participating in those as well, but finding them really helpful for those stakeholders who really want to dive deep into the topics and have a really good dialogue about those items. So last bit, just to close out, I think we're confident in our readiness to serve customers this summer. Our resource portfolio is providing adequate capacity above our forecasted peak demand. We remain committed to transparency with this commission and, of course, welcome any more questions that you might have, but feel like we are in a good position to serve customers reliably in the summer of 26.
Commissioners, any other questions?
While we still have P&M here, I mean, I've known Steve for a long time and he's giddy. So I was like, I'm optimistic, Steve.
Yeah, I'm
Wow.
gonna
welcome.
make sure I'm out of here before that 200-pound limit kicks in.
Yeah, no, I mean, just the difference between being long and being short is what I heard. So in your overall blood pressure and mood. So anyway, great to see you, Steve.
I think it's the batteries. Gives you so much versatility.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Let me just check with staff. Staff, any questions? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there you have it. Things seemed kind of dire in 2023. And we've come a long way. It seems like we're in good position. As the utilities mentioned, these are forecasts. Things can change, outages, price of natural gas and extreme weather. So, we'll keep our fingers crossed. So really appreciate the utilities coming to present before us. I'm gonna check with the commissioners for any closing remarks.
Yeah, I think I just want to explain where I'm at. Recently at the RAP, there was a proposal where they were improving the thing that they're doing that is very much the example of, what I was talking about with SPS is, it felt like they're just moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. So I tried to put something out there encouraging folks to do more, but it was probably understood only by me. And so I thought I would, for this group, just try to do a better job of explaining what I'm doing and why I'm after it. And then again, invitation for a further conversation. But and I'm going to pick on P&M slides just because you had the pictures back to back, so it's easy to hold the piece of paper up. Before I do that, I want to acknowledge exactly what you said is really the foundation of where I'm going is the system's getting more capable. It's getting more sophisticated. So in that world, oversimplification of what we're doing becomes a crime against affordability, right? So, these kind of charts, it's what hour are we talking about? It's just a stack against whatever. This doesn't tell you much. If it's telling me something, at best, it gives me a good sense of something on a BA level, a small system. this is much better. It shows how the day evolves. But then go and look at your own IRPs, go and look at the NERC long range assessment. In there, they've got heat maps that look at how each hour looks different across each month of the whole year. So the real problem with stuff like this is pretending that I'm good for 1 hour means you might not be looking at the hour that's really the problem. And I mean, another example was the change that SPS negotiated with SPP about overlapping outages, right? The real risk in the SPP system is the shoulder months because they've got every outage for the whole year crammed into very short windows. And if you get scheduled to take an outage, you're going to do it because it's precious and rare. And so what happened last summer was too many things were out all at once. Lights went off at Roswell, right? So that's an example where trying to oversimplify things, say, hey, there's a window where things aren't risky and there's a window where things are risky. That is not the world we're living in. So for those of you doing IRP, the struggle is real, right? You're trying to explain what you're doing. And then you've got me telling you, if you oversimplify it, you're committing a crime against affordability. And where the crime happens is, again, might be legit to simplify things on a small system basis, right? That's not where we're going. We're going towards large region. That's what RAP is about, right? You take this concept of Southwest Reserve Sharing Group, which marvelously successful, scale it up to WEC. If we just take like oversimplifying assumptions like UCAP, ICAP, 1 hour matters, and add all that up to the regional level, you've done two things. You violated the God of big numbers, right? So that concept is, as I keep adding things up, the errors are going to offset. So I'm okay. If you're just adding up conservative assumption on conservative assumption on conservative assumption, you've overshot the mark. And then the other is it gets rid of the whole reason why we're trying to get bigger is take advantage of diversity, right? One of the things I hear at SPP a lot, which is just blows my mind, is we're being fair. So what they're saying is this solar facility in Roswell looks exactly the same as a solar facility in North Dakota. No, it doesn't, right? So, but when they're being fair, they'll take the least common denominator thing and say, well, I'm not going to give the resources in SPS's system credit for the fact that they produce more because they're in a better solar irradiance area than a resource somewhere else. Because again, I'm being fair. So both of those things just add up to being expensive, right? And so this affordability challenge we've got, I'm sure you've all saw the governor's executive order here. That's an excellent executive order if you look at what's going on in some other states. So let's work together to make that thing work. But affordability is an existential risk for regulators. Things are getting more expensive. It's an existential risk for some folks who have to pay their bills to not be out on the street. So those are the reasons why I'm super charged up about that right now. What I was trying to say to wrap is let's move forward. Let's quit oversimplifying things just because it's comfortable or familiar. Let's challenge ourselves to think about the fact that, okay, I have a battery, I've got gas, I've got wind, I've got solar. The value of that battery goes up. If you think about it can be charged a bunch of different ways. And it goes up if you think about it's also spinning reserve. And it goes up if you think Steve Maestas is a smart guy and he's going to figure out how to use this thing wisely, right? So that's not the kind of battery modeling assumptions you see in these ELCC studies that are coming out. Like the one that created the capacity accreditation value at SPP, and I'm sorry, that last letter is hard, okay? They assumed a 4-hour battery was this thing that only discharged 4 hours a day, and I'm going to tell it which 4 hours, right? So you've got a super low battery accreditation value in SPP, and that's a great example of they oversimplified it, and we're the ones that are going to end up paying for it. So as a regulator that's involved in things like COSER, and we're all involved in the regional markets, this commission, New Mexico is one of the only states that's involved in every single one of these markets that's coming up, right? We've got load in OG SPP, we've got load in the SPP Western expansion, we've got EDAM, we've got Markets Plus. So this group plus this group, we have an opportunity to work together to try to lever the future to take advantage of the fact that we're doing new things. These new things are better than things were. Let's leverage that for reliability and affordability. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from. I'm not saying it's easy. So again, invitation for conversation. And if you ever see me doing something like, what the heck is that guy talking about? It's because it made sense up here, but that doesn't mean it made sense to anybody else. All right. So I welcome the conversation. Came up a little bit here, the big risk for everybody, the term that folks were using in Chicago at the Northwest Electricity Dialogue a couple of weeks ago is weather weirding. So, you know, we had our heat dome in March, so never had been 90 in Albuquerque before May. Well, we skipped April and we were over 90 for, I don't know, 4 or 5 days in March. So the thing is, what you're modeling, the history, that's what you've got. Things are going to be weird. So let's try to, again, acknowledge it's complicated, try to work together to get solutions on that. But if you're just simplifying stuff and making it expensive, that's the opposite direction of where I want to go, right? And then the last thing was, we were just at New Mexico State Current Issues Conference this week. Came up a lot at that conference. We've been, frankly, I've been hearing it for the 3 years I've been on this job. Utilities will come to regulators and say, we need a partnership. Like, okay, happy to do that. You're not the only person that matters, right? So partnership is also with your state, with your customers. And I'm sitting here listening to all of that stuff. And if I've got the utility saying, hey, let's just work together on this, that's not going to work. And then tons of stakeholder engagement. Again, it's getting more complicated, doing more stakeholders. I love the office hours idea. That was something that I know we talked about. How do we be more accessible and get more complicated in what we were trying to explain and do? But just reminder, and this came from an interview I heard on the radio with Wynton Marsalis, jazz musician, that listening takes discipline, right? So jazz, that's a conversation among the band. You got to listen to what your fellow players are doing and build on that. That's very different than hearing. So the point of listening is you got to be willing to be changed by what you hear. So if these stakeholder engagements are just, let me tell you what I need you to know, but you don't use the discipline, take the time, it's annoying to take in what you heard and think about what you just said, and maybe you can come up with something better. At a minimum, you might do a better job explaining it, but that was just a takeaway from me for this week. And again, goes back to where I started. I'm giving a speech right now, and I need to listen to you. So let's proceed that on that foundation and quit doing this. So anyway, I think that's enough.
Well, thank you. I really don't want to follow that, but I feel like now you're getting me going. No. Just briefly to add to all of that, which I really appreciate hearing your perspective there. On the regional question, you know, we have the RAP and now we have this EDAM RA program, right? That people are talking about. We're involved in Commissioner O'Connell in particular is involved in that. And what we want to make sure is that well, and maybe I don't want to speak for you, but I'm also involved in that through the Bosser. And what I want to make sure is that the accreditation for the resources is realistic and makes sense for the resources that we have in this state. And you're right, you know, if SBP looked at the value of battery more highly, maybe we would have different proposals right now. But it matters. Also want to just talk about one thing that I see, well, a couple of things that I see coming. One of them is we didn't mention at all geothermal today. Definitely something that we should be looking at. The characteristics of geothermal are, in my view, very unique and similar to other resources that we know well. I mean, when you think about coal, often it's cited where you have the raw material. And that's what geothermal is as well, is you have the fuel that you need for it right underneath you in the ground. And it's clean. It is still somewhat expensive, the exploration of it, right? Because you need to find it. But then in comparison to natural gas, you know, one of the comparisons we talked about before was the hydraulic fracturing, right? And so you're finding this resource in the ground. The difference, though, is that with natural gas, you're relying on that transportation to get the fuel to your plant. And when you really need it is in the wintertime when it's cold. And guess what? Other people are using that same fuel source to heat their homes. And it's not always going to be there. It's the reason why the accreditation for natural gas in other regions like New England ISO or PJM is 64%, 62%, right? Not the 90 some percent that exists in SPP. And so as you continue to add more natural gas and more competition for that transportation of the fuel, it might start to be less reliable. Geothermal, on the other hand, is not competing with those with the transportation pipeline because, as I just mentioned, the fuel is in the ground. And so what does that do then for, well, the other thing I want to talk about is we need to think about how these resources are working for customers, because they are working for customers when you put them in a regional market, and the value of those resources is bigger or smaller. In the case of geothermal, if you're using it during the same, you know, I'm thinking of like a cold winter day when natural gas is really expensive because it's being used and we need it. All of a sudden, that geothermal resource is more valuable in a market because it's going to earn the same energy price as every other resource. And that can help reduce the overall cost of fuel for customers. So I think those were the things. Is one of them is we're doing our part to be engaged in the conversation regionally with RAP, EDAM, RA, SPP, and just thinking about how these resources are working for customers, because that's really what, you know, one of the big things that we all share in this room is that we're working for the people out there, not in this room. So you got me going. That's so
This is
you next. All right.
No, just one comment that wasn't brought up, and that's because it's been a topic of prior conversations, and that is we're getting ready for summer. We're also getting ready for a potential wildfire season, probably already here. And you know, we've been talking to you all, and you all have been doing a lot of studies on that. But I just hope that those of you that find yourself in forested areas and maybe where the grass has grown taller than normal, that we're ready for that season as well. But thank you for your presentations, and we appreciate the ongoing efforts that we all face in trying to meet the demands that are upon us and try to maintain some semblance of affordability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've reached the end of our agenda. So with that, thank you again, and we are adjourned.